Well, let's conduct a thought experiment. Now, everyone here knows how waste is collected. Someone in our household does it almost every day. Now, once waste is generated, we collect it in a trash bin or a plastic bag, and at the end of the day, or maybe even two, we put it out on the street or give it to a trash collector. Now, imagine you came across a piece of gold in your house. I'm sure someone collects it and stores it somewhere safe. Now, at the end of each month or year, do you then put all that gold out on the street or give it to a gold collector to dispose it? Of course not, right? I mean, we wouldn't even get to the point where we carelessly find pieces of gold in our households. Now, imagine somehow a piece of gold did make its way onto the street. What will happen to it? Someone will collect it and take care of it. But why doesn't the same thing happen with a piece of trash? And once we pose that question, therein lies the answer. Trash has no value to us. A material becomes waste when it has no more value to us. And therefore, any time that we spend in collecting, sorting, or transporting it is not worth it. Now, let's ask ourselves another question. If waste is not worth our time, why even collect it and dispose it out of our house or take it away from our streets? Why not just leave it in the house or on the streets? Well, you know the answer. If we don't, it will impact our health. And this is the same reason why even if we find a valuable metal like uranium, we'll not keep it in our houses. It will severely impact our health. And that's how I understand waste. One, it has no value to the generator, which is us and everyone else. And two, if not collected and disposed of properly, it will severely impact our health and well-being. And these are also the reasons why we expect governments to perform waste management as a public service using the taxes we pay. But what I mentioned about value is, of course, not the case with all waste streams which leave your house. Some materials are worth the while of some of our fellow citizens, most of whom work in the mostly informal recycling sector. Metals, good quality paper, plastics, and glass might not have much value to us these days, but they are worth the while of informal recyclers. There is value in recyclables which can be reclaimed to provide livelihoods and protect our country and environment. And this is why we are seeing many entrepreneurs in the recycling sector these days. The value in recyclables is also the reason why we are asked to separate these materials from wet organic waste, and separating them makes it easy to deal with both the recyclables and the remaining wet waste. Now, given how frequently we generate waste in a day, the general lack of awareness about the impacts of our actions or inactions, whichever way you see it, it is difficult to achieve separation of waste at the source. Now, this is where I'd like to tell you about my experience with behavior change. I started in this sector in 2009, studying the situation in India to find solutions, and that research did find many short and medium-term technical solutions, which were published as a report by Columbia University. But the most sustainable long-term change required behavior change and social innovations. Some of my colleagues and I, well, at that point of time, some of my colleagues and I thought behavior change was the missing piece of the puzzle, and once we have it, everything will fall in place, and that will be able to solve our country's garbage crisis. But a few years later, unfortunate events in Bengaluru and Kerala led to garbage piling up on the streets for weeks and created a crisis in those regions. While what happened was unfortunate, it inspired many citizens to take action, and as was suggested by experts and governments, they started separating waste at source. So now we had a crisis, a real need to act, and we had citizens who were acting. The citizens learned what materials had to be separated and were carefully segregating them into separate bags and bins. But guess what happens next? When they hand the two separate bags to the trash collector, he would just chuck both of them together in the same truck or rickshaw, and thereby wasting all the effort that was put into separating them. Even worse, those municipalities lost the trust of these early adopters. They lost the opportunity to support behavior change. Now, another example is when I travel in India, I have to carry any recyclable waste that I generate in my pockets or my bag or car because it is difficult to find trash bins, and I cannot just tell myself or convince myself to litter or throw it anywhere. So in this case, I'm exhibiting a certain kind of behavior which is desirable for the country, but I do not have access to infrastructure to encourage that behavior. But things are changing in India thanks to Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Cities and villages across India are evolving with respect to waste management. But the lesson we should learn from our early failures is that behavior change can happen. Our citizens are willing to help. But for it to happen, it needs support from local governments. An example of support in the above case is, in the first case, would be providing separate transportation for recyclables and wet waste, then leveraging early adopters to create long-term change. Behavior change and appropriate infrastructure go hand in hand. It is similar to asking people to use toilets and then providing toilets in public spaces. And it is also similar to asking people to use trash bins in public places and then providing them with the bins. Now, once we collect the waste, there are many solutions on how to treat treat the waste sustainably and economically, depending upon how much time you have, what kind of resources you have access to, the local culture, and many such factors. And to learn more, you can go to the website of Be Waste Wise, where we bring experts from around the world to discuss solutions to and through waste. But finally, what we have to remember is that once we understand the value of different streams of waste and learn how to engage people to create behavior change, it is possible to solve the waste crisis in India, but it takes all of us doing what we can in our positions as individual citizens or in our jobs as employees of any organization or the government or as students and as teachers to get there, to get to a clean India, to a Swachh Bharat.